A man goes on social media, looks straight into the camera, and says that Nelson Mandela, the symbol of freedom, the face of reconciliation, didn't fight for a nation but for his own family. That statement alone has shaken conversations across South Africa. For many, it feels like more than just an opinion. It feels like an attack on history itself. But for others, it raises uncomfortable questions about the present. Because this is not just about one man's words. It's about rising tensions, growing anger, and a country once united now facing deep internal fractures. And what happens next could define the future of South Africa. If you want to stay informed on stories like this, make sure you like and subscribe, because this situation is still unfolding and it's far from over.
Mandela, foreigners must know that Mandela never owned all of us.
Exactly.
He owned his family.
He sold us.
Whatever he said to the foreigners, he was talking on behalf of his family, not us.
Not
Thina nje sihlangana no Mandela.
you.
uMandela kayikho into akasenzela yona ngaphandle
Fuck that.
kokudansa nezingane zabelungu.
What makes this story so important right now is not just the controversy around Mandela's legacy. It's the fact that these comments are coming at a time when xenophobic tensions are already high, when public frustration is boiling, and when influential voices are shaping narratives that can either unite or divide millions of people. At the center of this storm is Ngizwe Mchunu, a controversial figure often linked to strong anti-foreigner rhetoric. Known by some as a leading voice in the xenophobia movement, Mchunu has built a following by speaking directly to frustrations among certain South Africans who feel economically and socially marginalized. But this time, he crossed into territory many consider sacred. To understand why this has sparked outrage, you need to understand who Nelson Mandela was, not just as a man, but as a symbol. Mandela was not just a political leader. He was a global icon of resistance against apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation that oppressed the majority Black population in South Africa for decades. He spent 27 years in prison, sacrificing his personal life for a broader vision of equality and democracy. When he was released, many expected revenge. Instead, he chose reconciliation. He worked to build a South Africa that belonged to everyone, Black, white, local, and foreign. That's the legacy now being questioned. And that's why this moment feels so explosive. But here's where things start to get more complicated. The tension didn't start with this one statement. Days before Mchunu's controversial remarks, another figure entered the conversation, Jacinta Ngobese, someone reportedly aligned with similar anti-foreigner sentiments. According to accounts circulating online, Ngobese had cautioned Mchunu to be more careful about what he says publicly. That warning now feels significant, because what happened next raised serious questions. Despite the warning, Mchunu went ahead and made his statement anyway. Not in private, not in a closed room, but publicly on social media, where the message would spread instantly and widely. Was this a calculated move? Was it meant to provoke? Or was it simply a reflection of deeply held beliefs? This is the part few people are talking about. The timing. South Africa has been experiencing recurring waves of xenophobic tension for years. Periodic violence, protests, and calls to remove foreign nationals have created an unstable social environment. Economic struggles, high unemployment, and inequality have intensified frustrations, making migrants an easy target for blame. In that context, statements like this don't exist in isolation. They feed into something bigger. And when someone with influence questions the legacy of a figure like Mandela, it doesn't just spark debate, it can shift narratives. So let's break down how this unfolded step by step. First, Mchunu's statement appears online, quickly gaining traction. Clips are shared across platforms, drawing reactions from both supporters and critics. Then, older tensions resurface. People begin connecting his comments to ongoing xenophobic rhetoric, framing it as part of a broader agenda. Soon after, discussions about Mandela's legacy flood social media. Some defend him passionately, pointing to his sacrifices and leadership. Others, though fewer, echo criticisms, suggesting that modern South Africa has not delivered on the promises of his era. But here's where things start to take a more disturbing turn. As the debate spreads, the conversation stops being about a single statement and slowly transforms into something much larger. Mandela's legacy becomes a battlefield of opinions, where emotion often overrides facts and history gets pulled in different directions depending on who is speaking. Some users begin framing the issue as a generational misunderstanding, arguing that younger South Africans are reacting to present-day hardship rather than historical context. Others push back hard, insisting that questioning Mandela in this way is not criticism, but disrespect. And then the online environment intensifies. Clips of Ngizwe Mchunu's statement are reshared repeatedly, each time with stronger reactions, edited captions, and emotional commentary. The message becomes more amplified than the original words themselves. In some spaces, the discussion begins shifting away from Mandela entirely and focuses instead on foreign nationals living in South Africa, reopening old tensions that many believed were already cooling down. What happened next raised serious questions. Why did this particular statement trigger such a strong reaction compared to others in the past? And why now? Because beneath the surface, South Africa is dealing with deeper unresolved pressures. Economic inequality remains severe. Youth unemployment continues to rise. Public services are strained. In that environment, public frustration often looks for a target, and history shows that migrants frequently become part of that conversation. But this is where the situation becomes more sensitive. Because when a public figure ties current frustrations to historical narratives, it can reshape how people interpret both the past and the present. And that's exactly what many critics say is happening here. Supporters of Mchunu argue that he is simply expressing a viewpoint, one that reflects frustration in communities that feel ignored. They say he is highlighting uncomfortable truths about inequality and national ownership. But critics argue something very different. They say this is not just opinion. They say it is a dangerous distortion of history, especially when it involves a figure like Nelson Mandela, whose legacy is deeply tied to national identity and reconciliation. Meanwhile, the role of Jacinta Ngobi's reemerges in discussions online. Her earlier warning to Mchunu is now being replayed in comment sections and debates, with some suggesting that even within his own circle, there was awareness that his statements could escalate tensions. But despite that, the message still went out, and it spread fast. At this point, media attention begins to build. Commentary pieces emerge analyzing not just the statement itself, but what it reveals about South Africa's current social climate. Some journalists frame it as a freedom of speech issue. Others frame it as a warning sign, a reflection of growing polarization in society. And then comes the deeper question that few people want to ask out loud. If Mandela's legacy can be publicly reinterpreted in such a controversial way today, what does that say about how united the country truly is right now? Because reconciliation was not just Mandela's political goal. It became the foundation of modern South Africa's identity. If that foundation is being challenged in public discourse, then the implications go far beyond one viral statement. They touch on national stability, on trust, on collective memory, and on how history itself is understood by future generations. But even as debate continues, there is still no clear resolution. No official investigation directly tied to the statement. No legal consequences announced. Just growing tension online and an increasingly divided public trying to make sense of what is real, what is exaggerated, and what is being taken out of context. And this is where everything now stands, not concluded, not resolved, but escalating in conversation, interpretation, and emotional intensity. Because the real story is no longer just about what was said. It's about what people believe it means.